Hey guys, it's Brandon at the Command Zone for another Deck Tech. Today we're going to be looking at a fun general, a favorite of mine, which I've had built for a long time, Selenia, Dark Angel, who is 5 to play, 3 colorless, a white and a black, and she is a 3/3 flying angel and has the rules text that you can pay 2 life and bounce her to your hand. So this deck tech is about a combo deck. This isn't an aggro deck. This isn't a control deck. This is by far and away a combo deck that I find to be really fun and is really interesting because it's based not around creature damage or card combo, but it's really around using your life total as a resource and affecting other people's life totals as a resource too. So it's a lot of fun, a really cool build. It kind of takes a little bit of time to get down and play well because there are a lot of decisions that you have to make appropriately at certain times. But it's really cool. So let me go ahead and point out something really important about Selenia that you have to note going ahead and forward with this build, and that is, as we said before, you can pay 2 life to bounce her to your hand, and that's really important to note because the way the text is errated and the way that the ability actually works, you can pay 2 life in response to itself and continually pay 2 life before she actually leaves the board. So she doesn't require you to bounce her, pay 2 life and bounce her to your hand, and then that's it. You can actually pay 2 life over on top of itself and on top of itself until finally you do bounce her to your hand. So you can basically go from 40 down to 0 with 20 activations of this card and have it in your hand by the end of that and be at 0, which in some cases is extremely important and is a way that you're going to be using to kill people. So let's go ahead and take some look at some cards in Selenia. Okay, so the first bit of cards I'm going to look at are just ramp cards. You guys are probably familiar with the majority of them, so I won't go over them too quickly. The first one's Mox Diamond, just a way to get some more ramp out there. Really important, by the way, to have these free ramp spells like Mox Diamond and Lotus Petal here. Because if you start to draw your deck down very heavily and you need just a certain amount of mana to get to kind of a win con, these free spells allow you to get there without having to invest any resources in them, so they're very important. Mox Diamond and Lotus Petal. Next we have a Soul Ring, which is I think an auto-include in many decks. I like to pick up some fixing with Signets, so I have the Orzhov Signet in this one. And coming up the mana curve we have Pristine Talisman. And the Pristine Talisman is kind of a newer include. I actually like this card. You'll find at times that the way Selenia works is if you happen to be, and it's situational, if you happen to be at an even life total and you need to be at an odd life total in order to go down to, for instance, 1 at the end of turn for a near-death experience win, then you need something like the Talisman out to help adjust that, increment your life by just 1. Other times you might be at an odd life total, you want to be in an even life total, so you can pay all the way down to 0 with something like a Phyrexian Unlife on the board and be able to swap life totals and kill people that way. So Pristine Talisman actually comes in very handy in those cases, and I'm pleasantly surprised with how it's working out. Next we have Dark Steel Ingot, just keeps your mana on the board if things get destroyed. Thran Dynamo, pretty solid include, and of course Gilded Lotus. Alright, so those are the cards for the mana fixing. They'll all be listed, of course, in our final deck list online associated with the video, so please check out thecommandzone.com to find out those additional cards if you missed any one. Next we're going to move into draw. So the draw cards are important because you need cards in your hand to keep working, to keep digging deeper, to kind of find your combo pieces, but to also not fizzle out. The deck definitely hates top decking. And while Selenia can block for days like a champion, you don't want to have to keep recasting her after you block and bounce her to your hand and paying 2 life. It's just very annoying. So the first card we have in draw is Siphon Mind. It's just in there as a multiplayer card. It's not that great of a discard spell for other people. It's not really that great of a card advantage or draw spell for yourself. But in combination, it works pretty well when you're playing with 2-3 other players. Ambition's Cost, very good card. I really like this one. There's also another card that's the exact same card from a starter set, which I don't have the name of off the hand and I'm trying to get a hold of for the deck. But it does the same thing where you pay 3 life to draw 3 cards, and it's really good. Really important to have that card draw again. Necrologia, also in the deck, as an instant. It's a really great card, in fact. you play it during your discard phase, so you have to make sure that you maybe don't go past 7 if you don't have a reliquary tower out, but if you do, you can pay X life, draw as many cards as you want. And again, it really helps use your life total as a resource. And in this deck, don't be afraid to pay life. Don't be afraid to get hit with creatures. You're going to find that people at the table don't really know how often to deal with your deck, whether to attack or not to attack, because as you start to get low on life total, so does the rest of the table kind of become that much more afraid that you're going to start to do things that's going to negatively affect them, like swap life totals. Next we have Promise of Power, just another really big draw spell in black. I don't generally make the Flying Demon, but you can. The deck, in fact, only runs 3 creatures, including Selenia, so it's kind of the epitome of combo, and creatures, again, are not really the way to get there. So just in there for draw, and it's pretty good. If you need a blocker, you can make one, but I almost never have to. Night's Whisper, another draw spell, lose 2 life. I like it better than Sign in Blood because it doesn't require 2 black sources. I actually was running Sign in Blood instead of Night's Whisper, and you would be surprised, even with all the amount of resources in Commander, you know, the huge mana bases that we run with, I was still disappointed to have to spend 2 black on Night's Whisper when sometimes I just only wanted to spend 1 black and have black up for something else. And then finally, the last draw spell is, it's not really a spell, it's a permanent, Necropotence. Pretty good card. It's kind of a linchpin in many combos in the deck. You get to pay life to draw cards. You can only do it at your end step though, so you can't, you know, you set those aside and then, or actually you can do it any time, but you can only put those cards into your hand during your end step. So make sure to set those cards aside before you end your turn. But sometimes, you know, you can just flat out kill people with this card, as well as have ridiculously good card advantage. Again, it's good to have something like a Reliquary Tower on the table to get the full benefit out of it, but it's a really good way to manipulate your life total at a moment's notice, which is really important for the deck. Okay, moving right along, let's get into our tutors. So black and white, they're kind of known for their tutors, and I wouldn't have a black or white deck that doesn't run tutors unless I was really trying to limit my ability in the deck. So the first one we have here is Enlightened Tutor. The deck does run a lot of enchantments and a fair amount of artifacts, so having this as a tutor isn't really that bad. Even though it doesn't go to your hand and it goes to top of deck, you can search up almost any really key piece that might be functional or synergistic with another piece you might have in your hand. So it's really, really helpful. Vampiric Tutor, same thing as Enlightened Tutor, but it gets any card. It's very good. Demonic Tutor, auto-include, I think. Idyllic Tutor, really good in this deck because it brings a card directly, or sorry, an enchantment card directly from your library into your hand, which is sometimes very critical. You need to have it in your hand to cast it. Something like a Phyrexian Unlife, a land tax. You'll see a lot of other enchantments that I have here that are pretty critical to the deck functioning properly. And Idyllic Tutor serves a pretty good purpose. We have Beseech the Queen as well. It's a decent card. Just make sure that whatever you're tutoring for is equal to or less than the amount of the converted mana cost is equal to or less than the amount of lands you have in play, or else, you know, if you're spending it turn 3 for a near-death experience, then that's not really going to work out too hot for you. You can't tutor that card up with only 3 land on the battlefield. But beside that, it's a pretty fair tutor, and you can play colorless in it as well. Excuse me. The next tutor, the second to last, is actually a creature. So it's one of those creatures I mentioned are run in the deck besides Selenia. And the reason Academy Rector is in there, the only reason she's in there is to search for our enchantments, and really know the reason. So don't attack with her. Always leave her up as a blocker, and sacrifice her when you need to in order to get the enchantment that you need from your battlefield, or sorry, from your library onto the battlefield. And if you don't know about that card, please look it up. It is very good, and you should run it in white decks if you can, and you need to. And finally, we have Liliana Vess. Just another way to get those cards from the library on top of the library to draw for next turn, or to have some type of recursive or recurable tutoring effect going on. So next, we're going to be looking at our utility package in the deck, and this is stuff that you need in the deck to kind of deal with other decks when it comes down to you know, not having them just outright kill you, you know, ways to deal with their enchantments, other stuff like that. We've looked at some of the draw and the ramp stuff, but now we have to look at how we're going to deal with other decks. So the first one we have is a Nihil Spellbomb here. And the Nine Hill Spellbomb, I think, is better than a Tormod's Crypt for graveyard hate, and draws you a card. It's one to play, so yes, it's not free, but the fact that you can draw off of it is hugely important, and I think it's underestimated in a lot of decks. So Nine Hill Spellbomb for me is better than Tormod's Crypt, and I would happily recur Nine Hill Spellbomb over Tormod's Crypt any day. So I recommend putting it in. Second is Land Tax. Land Tax is a phenomenal card. It's a phenomenal card if you don't run it. I definitely recommend getting your hands on it and doing so. It is a now kind of, I think, a little overinflated because it was unbanned in Legacy as of the time of this video being released. But beside that, it fixes your land. It makes sure you hit your land drops. If you have in your opening hand, you can keep less amount of land as long as it doesn't get blown up, which it generally won't, or counterspelled, which it generally won't. And it's just really good because you can kind of combo off of it a little bit with other cards like Scroll Rack, for instance. Scroll Rack says pay 1 and tap to choose any number of cards in your hand and set those cards aside, and then put the equal number of cards from the top of your library into your hand. So basically what we're doing is for 1 mana and tapping Scroll Rack, after we've done a land tax activation of grabbing 3 lands from our library, we can Ancestral Recall. We can put those 3 lands aside, draw the 3 off the top of our deck, and then put those 3 lands back on the top. And the next time it comes to our turn to land tax, we'll just shuffle those land away. So really good. Those 2 cards are really strong together, and I definitely recommend running them. Of course, we have Top. Top is a auto include for me. It's library manipulation in this deck. Kind of needs it at times. Some decks it may be too slow in, but this one, it's just fine. This is a combo deck, so we're kind of sitting and waiting for the right time to make our move. The next card I have is actually a proxy, so I don't want to hear too many groans out there, but is a Yawgmoth's Will. Yawgmoth's Will, we can look it up online, but also states that for 2 colors and a black sorcery speed, we can this turn cast cards from our graveyard as though they were in our hand. And any card that goes to the graveyard, including Yawgmoth's Will, this turn gets exiled. So it's a way to kind of, in case someone destroys a critical combo piece, or you're all hopes are but lost, and you need to start to replay stuff to make it work, you can use Yawgmoth's Will to kind of re-energize your deck and get back in there. Next card is Aura of Silence. I really love this card. Undervalued, underplayed in my opinion. But it's just so strong. It makes artifact and enchantment spells for all opponents cost 2 more. So Soul Ring is now 3 instead of 2, or sorry, 3 instead of 1. And you can sacrifice it in order to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. So the fact that you can tutor this up off of, say, a Wrath of God, and you have your Academy Rector out there, you can bring your Aura of Silence into play. And if someone else has a mana reflection on the board, you can immediately sacrifice it to get rid of the mana reflection. And that's so strong after a Wrath of God, because then that player's not going to be going twice as fast as the rest of the people on the board. And you can really keep that deck in check. So definitely consider playing it. Replenish just seems really good in this deck, and has been good in this deck because it returns all enchantment cards from graveyard to play. And we'll look at a lot of these enchantment cards, as I've said. Return to Dust, a way to get rid of pesky enchantments and artifacts for good. Beacon of Unrest. I actually don't use this for the reanimation aspect, the getting the creature back into play. In fact, you'll notice beside this spell there are no reanimation spells at all, because again, we are combo. What this does though is it gets back some of your artifacts into play that you might have lost over the course of the game or had to sack for some reason, like your Nihil Spellbomb. It seems bad to spend 5 mana on a Nihil Spellbomb, but that's not the only artifact that we're going to be resurrecting. And sometimes it's all the difference, you know. Plus you can get someone else's Runescar Demon from their yard, and you can be super happy about that. Get your combo pieces and so on and so forth. Next we have Eternity Vessel. I'm not sure if I'm keeping it in, but it helps us kind of stabilize our life total if we're really taking lots of damage really fast. The deck probably should play fetches, but it doesn't. And anyway, we'll get into that a little later. Next we have Beacon of Immortality. This is kind of a fun card because it helps get your life total up. With something like Sanguine Bond out, you can kind of insta-kill people. It's just another one of those ways to combo, and the deck needs ways to win, so we're going to leave it in there for now. And then Arbiter of Nullridge, just another way to keep your life totals above water in case something happens. And you're not really worrying about other people's life totals because, again, we're using ours as a resource. Once we get low enough, everybody else is going to get low enough. That's just the name of the game. And people actually will like you when you play Arbiter of Nullridge because It you know, that one guy who's just going so crazy and taking everybody else out at the table, who thinks he's got the game on lock. You know, once Arbiter of Norwich comes into play, you know, everybody's back at the highest life total. So that guy is kind of shut out, and everybody's very happy about that. So let's go to removal. Removal is definitely very serious in this deck because, again, we have to protect our combo, and we can't just get beaten face super hard. And very aggro decks are kind of hard to play against it a little bit. So we'll start with the 1-drop range. First is Swords. Next is Path. Then we have Go for the Throat. I don't run Doomblade. I don't like the fact that it doesn't hit black creatures. I don't really care about black creatures as much as I don't really care about artifact creatures as much as I care about black creatures because there are a lot of really good black creatures in the format. I want to kill Shieldred, but I don't. Next we have Mortify. It hits creatures or enchantments, so it's very good at instant speed. Of course, Vindicate. It's a sorcery speed, but it destroys any permanent on the field, and that's kind of critical at times. And then we're going to move into the sweepers. Day of Judgment doesn't let you regenerate, so you don't really see it usually played in EDH, but I would definitely play it. And same with Wrath of God, of course. Damnation's next. We have Rout. And I know you guys are going to be looking at me like I'm crazy, like this guy just doesn't care about anything on the board, and you know, he just wants to make the game miserable for everybody. Well, you know, it may be true that we have to protect our combo a little bit, but you're not going to be casting Wrath after Wrath after Wrath. They're only about, in this case, total Wraths 5 or 6. So the fact that you get a handful of those is probably pretty uncommon. And not to mention everybody else is running Wraths too. So it's just a way to regulate the board. And at critical mass, generally people get too stupid to control anyway. So they're just in there for a little bit of protection. I think mid-game mostly. The last two I think are my favorite spells. The first one's Hallowed Burial, another proxy. Don't mind it. I'm sorry. This is great. It's actually better than Wraths in my opinion because you get to tuck all the creatures underneath the battlefield. You can bounce Selenia in response to casting this to keep her on the field. Or if she's not out there, tuck everyone else's creatures away, including their generals. And there's generally not much they can do about that. It's extremely strong, which is why I also run Terminus. For 1 white, even better. Alright. So before we get to win cons, I realized that I did not go over the mana base. And we'll go over that just really briefly right now. You guys can probably already understand, anticipate what I'm going to be bringing out here. But the first one is 12 Swamps. So we're going to have 12 Swamps on the field. In the deck, and hopefully on the field, of course. The next is going to be 11 Plains. So we have 11 Plains as well. And this is just the basic land count of the deck. There are 23 total basic lands in all. And then the non-basics, which are probably more critical, are pretty common too, but we'll go over those real fast. Command Tower, Godless Shrine, Scrubland, Fetid Heath, Isolated Chapel, Orzhov Basilica. Lets us bounce lands if we need to. It's a way to color fix. I don't generally play with bounce lands, but I've been fairly happy with it in here. The next two, of course, are really nice in combination. It's Cabal Coffers and Urborg. Bajuka Bog, some graveyard hate. Vesuva, in case we need to copy or blow up someone's land, or copy one of our own, for instance. It's generally pretty good. And next we have Core Haven, which is really important for giant generals that we just can't deal with, or just something that's becoming extremely bothersome. It helps us protect from that. We have Ancient Tomb. Life loss is pretty marginal. It's pretty non-important. Next we have Temple of the False God, which I would probably take out as a first land to consider because it doesn't provide mana instantly if it comes out early game. And the last one is Reliquary Tower. Okay, guys. So you're asking, okay, we have all these really cool things like ramp, draw, tutor utility, and removal. But how do you win the game? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's start by taking a look at kind of the core way to win. And the way we're going to win to start with is by casting out cards like Children of Corliss and Tainted Sigil. And these cards basically let us sack these ones, Children of Corliss and Tainted Sigil, to gain life back that we've lost. So say we have Selenia, we bounce ourselves down to 2, and we don't want to be at 2, but we want to be at our prior life total, which is, we'll say for instance, it's at 40. Well, we want to gain 38 back. Well, why would we want to gain 38 back, beside going to a high life total and not being just an obvious target to die to? Well, you might have cards like the following. So when we have these guys out, we might also have something like Sanguine Bond. So Sanguine Bond lets me deal damage when I gain life. And when I activate Children of Corliss and Tainted Sigil, I'm gaining life. So when I go back to a life total, I'm gaining life. Um, Also, if you have something like Wound Reflection as well on the field at the same time, they'll lose twice as much life by the end of the turn. So that could be potentially an instant kill, which is pretty darn strong, as they say. And then the last thing I'll mention here, while we're still looking at some of these cards, is I have Exquisite Blood as well in the deck. And the reason I have Exquisite Blood in the deck is because of the Sanguine Bond combo, where if I were to gain life or any opponent were to lose life, all opponents lose instantly. Yeah, it's kind of a janky combo. It's very cheap, but you know what? If there are only maybe like 5, 6 specific scenarios, card combination scenarios to win, and I'm not a beatdown deck, so not if I don't have like 20 creatures, for instance, then I need those ways to win. So just increasing the way to win is okay. And I hardly ever win with this combo anyway. So you'll note that while it is cheap, it's not generally the way you're going to win at all. So let's go ahead and take those 3 enchantments off the board, and we'll look at a few other ones. So let's say you're down pretty low, but you don't want to gain your life back just yet. Well, we're going to be playing some other cards, for instance. Say you want to go down to 0, but you don't want to die. You have something like Phyrexian Unlife, which allows you to be set to 0. You can't go from an odd amount of life down to a negative amount of life. It's just impossible because you cannot pay life that you do not have, which is why you want something like Pristine Talisman to set you to an even amount of life. But once you are at that even amount of life and you can bounce your life total down with Selenia, you can go to 0 just fine. And at that point, if you want to do something like play Repay in Kind, everybody else is pretty much toast. So sending everyone else's life total, the lowest life total amongst all players, is pretty good at that point. With a low life total, we can also do something like play Mirror Universe, which is the same thing actually as Magus of the Mirror, except Mirror Universe is an artifact, and it just lets us swap life totals with an opponent during our upkeep. Of course, we have to sack those too, but we can always get them back with our reanimation spell, and generally we don't need more than one at any given time anyway. But if we want a reusable one, why don't we just play Soul Conduit? Soul Conduit lets us swap 2 life totals between target players. It doesn't even have to be our own. So that way, if we want to, we can go from 0 to 40 instantly, so on and so forth. And then, of course, Reverse the Sands is pretty strong. It lets us redistribute any number of players' life totals. So we can kind of pick and choose and be a little political about who we want to stick around and who we don't. Or just kind of, punish someone for being too much of a guy, whatever, during that time that we're playing. Okay, so what are some other ways to win? Well, we talked about being able to set ourselves really low with our life total due to Selenia's ability, as well as Necropotence and some other cards. So what are we going to do with that when we're down that low? Maybe we'll play something like Near-Death Experience to win. And this is that's definitely a doable win condition. I've done this on a number of occasions. And it definitely helps when you have something like Angel's Grace to play. So just to be forewarned that Near-Death Experience states it's an intervening if. It says that at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 1 life you win the game, you have to be at 1 at the prior person's end step. So you can't actually go to 1 in response to this trigger. This trigger has to see you at 1 before it's able to actually tell you that you've won the game. So just make sure when you go to 1 that you don't die at the end of their turn by playing something like Angel's Grace, and during your upkeep you should be just fine, as long as Near-Death Experience doesn't get blown up. If it does, then Reverse the Sands, Mirror Universe, something like that will hopefully keep you in the game. Also cards like, for instance, Exsanguinate, it's just a way to win, it's just a way to get your life total back up. It's one of those Genesis waves, I think there's like an Insurrection, for instance. There's a card in every color that I think are kind of instant win cards, and you can just include them to increase the power of your deck. Hatred is one of the ways to win with combat damage. No one really ever sees Selenia. They generally let her through. If someone's not going to be able to block Selenia and you beat in with her and you cast Hatred, and you have enough life to pay for general damage, you can win. But just be careful. Don't play Hatred if you only have like 15 life left, because you'll only deal 18 points of general damage and it'll be pointless. So The last two cards I have here, before I go to the last two cards I have, are kind of combo-y cards. Again, this is a combo deck. Ad Nauseam and Silence. So, Ad Nauseam works really well with Angel's Grace. It allows you to draw your deck down, but not die, and start to cast out some spells. Hopefully you have some of the free ramp, like the Lotus Petal or the Mox Diamond, and can be done, or you have a Reliquary Tower on the field. And once you do that, if you have enough mana in your pool to cast out some of those critical win conditions, you will have the game. So to protect that, to make sure no one interrupts, you can always silence during your upkeep. Or if there's a combo player who's about to win, you can silence them. In some cases, it's worked defensively as well as offensively. So consider the uses for each of those cards. They come in handy. And one of the last two cards I'll point out, and that you'll wonder why the heck they're in the deck, but hopefully I'll help explain that, are these two. The first one's Pestilence. So at the end of each turn, if no creatures are in play, I have to sacrifice it, but I can pay 1 black into it to deal 1 damage to each creature and player. And Crypt Rats. Okay, a 1/1 creature that deals X damage to each creature and player, just like Pestilence does, by only spending black mana. Well, you'll note that sometimes that you can't always get your life total down to 0 before you swap with somebody. So while you may be really close and get them down to 2 or 1 or maybe 3, you just can't finish the job, and that's super annoying if they're just lingering around for a few turns at 1 or 2. It's still a threat on the board. So one of the ways that we get around that and that we deal with it is by playing Pestilence and Crypt Rats. So we'll set someone down to 2, or we'll set ourselves down to 2 or 1, for instance. We'll swap our life totals. I'll be at 30, they'll be at 2 or 1. And I need a way to polish them off. Crypt Rats or Pestilence are good. They come in off of, Pestilence can come in off Academy Rector, can be tutored out with some of the, the Idyllic Tutor or Enlightened Tutor. And Crypt Rats is a creature, so you can use something like a Demonic Tutor or Vampiric Tutor to get that one out as well, if you don't have it. But they are pretty important. They become pretty important inclusions in the deck and really help you win. So, alright guys, that has been it for Selenia, Dark Angel, the combo deck tech. Really hope you've stayed with us and you've learned a little bit from this deck tech today. And if you have any questions or comments, please drop us a line. Let us know on YouTube, or go to straight to the site, thecommandzone.com, and let us know what you think. Alright, happy game.